Okay, so in this video I'm just going to demonstrate this breadboard MIDI keyboard that has been built as a kind of prototype for a student project. It's been built on a breadboard just to keep it simple, keep the assembly simple, and uh, be able to build it quickly and debug it quickly, and to be able to reuse the components at the end of the course. You can remove the buttons and the resistors and the Arduino, and hopefully reuse all of those components in your next class. The buttons are laid out to work like a piano keyboard. So we have the white buttons representing the white keys, starting with the C and going up one octave, and then the black buttons for the C sharp and the various other notes that you can play. And there's really not a lot more that is happening here. We have the resistors taking it down to ground so that the inputs aren't floating. The various jumpers to the digital and analog inputs on the Arduino. The Arduino's in a little case here, and we have two potentiometers that are hooked up to the Arduino but aren't working in the actual code that we'll look at. But they could be used to do various things that on your synthesizer. So the basic idea will be that the code that we'll look at is going to receive a button being pressed and send a MIDI note on that will then be played on a synth, on a soft synth here on the Mac, but just as easily could be run under Windows or on Linux. So just looking at the code quickly, this is the Arduino code that's running on the Arduino currently. It's just running, some standard kind of typical things you would see, looping through an array of the various inputs in order, starting from that C4 and working up to the top of the notes. Initializing all the inputs, initializing all those pins as inputs, and then setting up the MIDI library and setting the baud rate for the serial line. And then here in the main loop, it's simply continually reading those inputs by looping through that same array, checking to see what the state of the input is, and with the digital read, and then sending a note on message through MIDI. It sends a note on with the MIDI note number. So they start at C4 with the value 60 and then just work up by 1. So it just sends that on with a velocity of 127 on channel 1. Waits a second, and then it sends a note off message. Now this is really just code to demonstrate it working, to demonstrate the basic concepts of sending MIDI, just a kind of skeleton setup to get to make sure this is working fully. You certainly don't want to be leaving a delay in here inside of your main loop, and you might be concerned about other things like debouncing your button inputs, or adding additional features. The potentiometers right now are not being represented in here. You might have other things you want this to do, like send out patterned notes as like an arpeggiator. This is not a particularly easy keyboard to play very musically, but it could be a great little controller, coupled with some code on here doing the arpeggiator. That probably could sound really good at that point. So things that can definitely be built on. But this is kind of just making sure that it's, everything is functioning and that we can make the connection from the Arduino through the computer and into our synth. So I'll just do that now. I just uploaded that, and I'll open up a synth that I have here for the Mac. But you could be using any synth. You could be using something like Yoshimi or AM synth on Linux, or any kind of MIDI controllable soft synth on Windows. So there is a missing piece of software you need, though, in this kind of recipe, and that is this hairless MIDI serial bridge. So it's receiving MIDI coming through the Arduino by selecting it as this USB device. And it can either receive MIDI and send it somewhere on your computer, or it can or it can be sent MIDI, excuse me, from here. So for instance, if I were to open up a little keyboard that I have down here called MIDI keys, I can send MIDI messages by selecting this here. So I would actually be sending MIDI into the Arduino by doing that. But we're going the other way. So I'll just turn that off. And in order for me to get this MIDI that's coming from the Arduino into this synth, I need to kind of send it to this virtual device. And these are configured on my Mac under the audio MIDI setup. And I believe under Windows and Linux, there's a similar kind of loopback device. Sorry, I can never remember what that, here, it's over here. A similar kind of loopback device. So this is what it is on the Mac. I have to turn that online, and once I've done that, this appeared in the drop down in this hairless MIDI connector, and then it also appears here in the synth. So under the MIDI tab, I've already turned it on, so it should be receiving the MIDI that is coming in. So let's just try that. So I'll just press the C4. You can hear that coming through. You can see that device coming from, or the message coming from the Arduino. That was a Note 60 with velocity 127 coming up into this IAC driver and then coming into the synth. As I said, it's not, I mean, there's this delay on here for a second as well. Let's see, that's an F. That's a G. And so it is holding that note for a second. You can't play repeatedly. It's stuck in that delay that I was mentioning. But messages are being sent and it's working, and you can hear of course you could select all sorts of things at this point. You know, you could be turning on other synths on this synth and make it sound a little different. And that's about it. So yeah, it was a fun little project to put together, and not too many difficulties. Certainly, this little connection from MIDI from the Arduino into the hairless into the synth just took a little bit of working out, but in the end, it's a fun little project to build, and something that I'll be trying with some of my engineering students.